And we're live on Book Chat Live. And today we have the amazing author, Erika Lynn Adams. So welcome to the show, Erika.
Thank you very much.
So you are the author of at least one book, but you've given me quite an eclectic selection of books today. So can you briefly describe who you are and why you've picked this list of books?
I'm Erika Lynn Adams. I'm from Duluth, Minnesota. Yeah, I've always had a firm belief that stories can be told in a plethora of ways, not just different genres, but different media as well. I have a radio show called The Tale Collector, in which I discuss different stories that people may not know about, or, some people may have forgotten about that, aren't very mainstream.
Okay. Well, should we start with the first book then?
Sure.
Which is The Incredible Shrinking Man by Richard Matheson. So why did you pick this book then?
Because I think it's a different take on the whole idea of the B movies of the 1950s. This was written in the 50s, during the time when people were afraid of like nuclear war happening, and this was in literature as well as cinema. And then, and yeah, you know how like in a lot of those stories, it's like, this is when people thought like radiation can do literally everything, like it could turn you into something, it can make something bigger, smaller, but yeah. In this case, it's not like a person like turning into a monster or like, making an insect a giant. It's, shrinking a human being. It's not like they're a mutant in the literal or the traditional sense. It's like outwardly they're the same, but at the same time, it's like, when they're getting smaller, it's like, it's like the smaller the main character gets, the less human he feels, the less human he feels like he's being treated. So yeah, in the story, the main character is exposed to radiation and he starts shrinking more and more. But also I like it because it's like it, treats the idea of, constantly shrinking in a very realistic way. It's not like a fantasy a la Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's not like a big epic fantasy adventure. So yeah, the guy is literally fighting for his life at a certain point when he gets small enough for things to literally pose a danger, like a cat, for example, or a spider. So it kind of treats the whole 1950s mutation concept in a takes it in a very unique, different direction. It also treats it very realistically. Talks about the insanity of it all. So it's like the main character is, he's constantly on the verge of, losing his mind or, contemplating suicide. It's, feels very visceral and real.
Okay, so how did you encounter this book in the first place? I mean, it sounds like it's quite an old kind of 1950s, 60s book.
Yeah.
Did you stumble across it, or was it your parents' books, or something like that?
Yeah. So I think part of it is at the moment I'm working on a science fiction novel, where my main character is a big fan of, 1950s and 60s science. Part of the inspiration to that was, from a friend of mine who reintroduced me to the original Star Trek. And I think I encountered this book as I was, going through researching stories of this type, like the old black and white stuff. Yeah, and this was made into a movie about 2 years after the book's publication. And that has held up surprisingly well, considering the kind of stuff that came out during that time, which objectively, it, may not be great, but yeah. So they did a great job with that too, in my opinion.
Okay, shall we move on to the next book, which is A Midsummer Night's Fairy Tale by Terry Windling and Wendy Froud. Ooh, nice cover.
Yeah. So this one I found at my local Barnes and Noble. I think I was kind of going through a Brian Froud phase. Yeah, Brian Froud is a very famous fantasy artist. If you don't know his name, some of you may have seen his work. He was involved in a lot of the puppetry in movies like Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal. So, this was worked on by his wife, Wendy, who is a famous doll maker. I think she helped write the story, but mostly she helped with for lack of a better word, illustration. I say that because the illustrations aren't drawn, but they're actually photographs. And they're photographs of doll that she made, which are the characters in the story, which was written by Windling. And they're just, they're like a mix of, very elegant, but also, very adorable. That's right there is the main character named, little fairy named Sneasel. Very cute character.
Can you show us some? Can you open up and show us some of the photos inside? Or
like here. And yeah, like I said, if you've seen Labyrinth of Darkness, kind of the Froude's work.
So it's basically a beautiful book then, really, as much as anything.
Yeah. So yeah, you can admire the photographs as well as the story. They mesh really well together. And the story is, very nice too. A big fairy celebration going on, and Sneasel, wants to be a part of it, do something important. But, because of his, status and his youth, he just kind of keeps getting, shooed away by the adults, and he's just kind of questioning his self-worth. But then he uncovers a plot which involves dethroning the fairy queen Titania. So he has to, gather his courage and save the day. Feel like that's a story, a lot of children can relate to.
Yeah.
It's like if they feel like they're, really small, then, they may not be important, but, they are important.
Okay. Shall we move on to the next book?
Okay.
Varvik Paw by SF Said.
This one I found kind of by accident. I probably wouldn't have thought much about it if not for the illustrations. I'm a big fan of Dave McKean. He has worked extensively with Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
You've probably seen a lot of his illustrations if you've read a lot of Neil Gaiman's work. And from there, he has, very elegant yet, sharp illustrations.
Yeah.
Especially with cats, and cats are naturally elegant.
Yes, yeah.
This works really well. Also, for all intents and purposes, this is a novel, but at the same time, he like works in elements that kind of resemble a graphic novel.
Yeah.
Like he uses a lot of white text on black, at certain points of the story. Like even some gray for more like mystical scenes.
Yeah.
Like in the story, the main character Varjak Paw, when his house is invaded by a man and his two unnatural black cats, he has to go outside and try to find a creature called a dog. He doesn't know what a dog is, so he has to try to find a dog to save his family. And during the story, in his dreams, he is visited by his ancestor, Jalal, who is said to be the greatest Mesopotamian cat of all time.
Yeah.
So he teaches them what's known as the 7 skills of the way, which is sort of like a feline martial arts. And that's, not as goofy as it sounds. It's not like, the stereotypical karate type thing. No, but yeah, Jalal, Varjak and Jalal kind of had, there's sort of a, like Miyagi type relationship. He, teaches them the way, but also, ways to apply it to real life, not just to fight, but also to, he applies it to real life situations.
Okay. Well, do you want to go to the next book, which is by a famous author? And that's The Eyes of the Dragon by Stephen King. So, why this book? Apart from the fact that everybody seems to pick a Stephen King book on this show. So,
yeah, and I could be wrong about this, but I feel like this is one of his more obscure stories, partly, due in large part to it not being horror. So a little piece of history about this one. I think, by the time Stephen King wrote this one, he had well established himself as a horror writer because he had like The Stand and It and Carrie and the like already well out. So by this time, I think partly because his children wanted him to try a fantasy novel, for younger readers, and so he obliged with this one. But then when he published it, the reception was kind of lukewarm at best. Fun fact, he used that experience as his inspiration for Misery later on. So if you know the plot of Misery, you know what that means, yeah. But also, yeah, I mean, admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of Stephen King, partly because of his pacing, and also, and this is not a fault. Just know this is no fault, but I think partly because like in his like contemporary works, or like more real world works, he uses a lot of like pop culture references that
Yeah,
I don't understand, and that's simply a generational thing. So I don't fault him for that. But this one I feel is a little more approachable because it's a sword and sorcery type novel. Anyone who has read The Stand or the Dark Tower series will recognize the character Flag. I have not read those books myself, but I looked it up, and apparently the villain Flag in here, he's a like an evil medieval sorcerer. He's also major characters in those stories. So Stephen King fans, I think will get a kick out of that too.
yeah, yeah. It's nice when there's a unreference. There's a reference you can pick up between books, isn't there, in the series?
Yeah.
Okay, shall we go to the next book,
All
which
right.
is The Child Thief by Brom. And it's just Brom. I don't know who Brom is, but
Yeah, that's a pseudonym.
yeah,
Yeah. So this is sort of a very dark reimagining of Peter Pan.
yeah,
So yeah, in his afterword, Brahm talks about how, like as a kid, like a lot of kids, he was a big fan of Peter Pan, but he didn't understand a lot of like the darker elements. It was all about like the kids beating the evil adults. And what kid doesn't love that?
yeah,
But then when he read the original James Barrie story and actually paid attention to some of the dialogue, you kind of realize just how much of a little psychopath or a little demon that Peter can be. Like, when I think there's a quote in there in the original where it's like, when the kids, begin to grow up, which is against the rules, he thins them out, you know? So in this story, besides Peter, the main protagonist is a New York kid named Nick, who's, struggling with guys, who sell drugs and they're harassing his family and he doesn't know what to do. So Peter, comes and promises him, there's a land where, grown-ups aren't allowed and
yeah,
we can do whatever we want. Yeah, it turns out Peter has been recruiting these kids to be young soldiers in a war that's going on. Instead of Neverland, it's basically the land of Avalon. Brom, incorporates a lot of like Welsh and Celtic mythology in
yeah.
this, kind of little Arthurian legend here and there. And there's kind of I don't remember if she's officially called the Lady of the Lake, but she's known as the Lady. So I think she's kind of a different version of that. But yeah, Brom kind of takes the idea of the Lost Boys, quote unquote Lost Boys, and kind of portrays them as we know of like gangs, like it's kind of gang war kind of relationships between the kids. Peter is kind of the gang leader,
Yeah.
you know. So there's a lot of, visceral realism in that too, even with all the magical creatures that are, scurrying around. But yeah, I think it was a very interesting take on that. Um,
So how did you chance upon this book? Was this one another book you came across as you was researching, or are you just kind of into this kind of fantasy?
yeah, I had read another of Brahms' books, which was also very good. The uh, the Plucker, I believe it
Oh,
was.
okay.
It was a different story, but I became fond of his work. After
Yeah,
reading that. That one's one that involves like a toy that comes to life. And he has to save his young owner from an evil voodoo spirit.
yeah,
A lot of voodoo magic in that one. So very very different, but also very very cool piece of work.
yeah.
So,
Okay. Shall we go on to the next book,
mhm.
which is Beast by Donna Jo Napoli. So
Mhm.
Napoli. So why did you pick this one then?
So this is a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast. Um, I I think I read somewhere that it's based loosely on a Persian version of that story. I don't remember where I found that though, because there are lots of different versions of Beauty and the Beast, not just the
Yeah.
European one we're all familiar with. Um, at first, I wasn't really sure about this one because one of the reasons why I like the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale is um, seeing what the beast is going to look like.
Yeah.
It's like you're going to make a beast.
Yeah.
Make him like like alien demon kind of thing. I think that's one of the coolest parts of it. So when I'm looking at this and I see that the prince in question is turned into a lion, I'm like, oh, that's kind of boring.
Yeah.
But then I decided to give it a try anyway, and um, I mean, the story more than made up for that. So this is a story from the beast's point of view. I don't know if this is the first to do that, but this is definitely one of the more fascinating ones. So
Yeah.
the prince is a Persian prince, and he is cursed because of a mistake he makes involving a sacrificial camel. So he's cursed by, I think it's pronounced jinn, not
Yeah.
genie, but like
Yeah.
jinn slash fairy, um, to become a lion, until he can find a woman who loves him. And so, he like makes his way, from Persia, travels throughout the Middle East until he makes it to France. There's a lot of like Arabic and Persian vocabulary used throughout the book. The author really did her research. She even includes a little glossary at the end of the book, so readers who aren't sure of the foreign words, can know what they
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah. I think gin is like where genie comes from, but it's
Right.
specifically the Middle Eastern kind of original version of it. It's more like a
Yeah.
dark spirit rather than this thing that jumps out of a.
Right.
Thing.
So yeah, it really depends on like what lore you're looking
Yeah.
at. But yeah, you're right about that. But I think in this context, it's more like a fairy.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we go to the next one, which is Courtney Crummin and the Night Things by Ted Noffe. Oh, sorry, Ted.
Knife, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had to figure that out too. I think it's knife or something.
Noffe. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is technically a special edition where, like, when he was first writing Courtney Crumrin, I think like each of like the special edition books that came out later are comprised of like 4 different issues,
Yeah.
because they were originally because they're comics. So this is just the first compilation of the first 4 volumes. And this particular collection, there's 7 in total. Yeah, this one I found because this was like one of the last books I was looking at Walden Books before that store eventually closed down, because it couldn't compete with Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
It's really too bad. So I have fond memories of that. But once I found the nice, color version, I couldn't resist that.
Yeah.
And it was nice to have all the issues in order, because they weren't really in order at the bookstore. So this has some. Knifey has a very interesting art style that kind of alternates between like really simplistic and yet really detailed. Like I don't know if you can tell from here. So like if the characters are, like in the distance, all you see are like little dots for their eyes, but if they're up close, they have, he, details them a lot more, you know. The plot is, delightfully dark. It's like,
Yeah.
what kid hasn't wanted to use magic to get back at their bullies,
Yeah.
you know? But yeah, Courtney Crumlin, she has, idiot parents, who are always saying like, don't pick fights, because, we know this kid's parents,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but then she learns, she meets her great uncle Aloysius and finds out that her family has a long line, or her her lineage involves the use of witchcraft, and so
Ah.
she decides to use it for herself. And yeah, and yeah, the people she goes up against, they're like a mix of like selfish and stupid, or just plain snobbish. you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's kind of some stereotypical stuff about that. But yeah, you really, so it's really fun to see her, get back at her enemies, but at the same time, she's not, a selfish brat. It's like you can tell like throughout that, based on like with every adventure she goes through, she goes through a lot of pain. She actually makes friends only to lose them a lot of times. So it's a very dark series. Not always a happy fairy tale ending. And these the kinds of fairies here. They're not like the fluffy Disney fairies. They're like the dark ones you see in like old European folklore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't eat food in the fairy world or else you're going to be cursed to stay there forever.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Well, I think a lot of the traditional European fairy tales are actually quite dark. I mean, they've
Yeah,
been sanitized for the 20th century, 21st century audience. So,
very, very true. So
yeah,
similar to Brahm, with the child thief, Ted, is kind of going for a similar vibe here.
yeah,
He does not, mince words as far as what fairies are capable of.
yeah. Okay. Shall we go to the next book,
Mhm.
which is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So I think I've got that right.
Mhm.
So why this book?
Yeah. First of all, because it just looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
Black, white, and red. Um,
Oh, yeah.
Picture there.
Yeah.
But yeah. The cover was a big draw, but also I'm very fond of circuses and books. Yeah, I feel like they're a lot more creative in books nowadays. So I mean, except for maybe Cirque du Soleil, I still enjoy Cirque du Soleil. But I digress. But yeah, also, so yeah, the two main characters in this book, Celia and Marco, they're each trained from childhood by a magic user, and they use very different methods of magic. And once they're adults, they're to be pitted against each other in a battle, in a like magical battle of wits, but with a circus as the arena. But no one else knows what's happening. All they know is that there's a new circus in town, and it's only open at night. And instead of one big tent with a bunch of acts in it, it's a bunch of little tents that people can go touring in as they please. All they know is that it's just the most fantastic thing they've ever seen, and they're satisfied with that. But the problem is when Celia and Marco, when they finally meet and they realize, that they're both opponents, they end up falling in love. Not only messes up the contest, but more importantly, it affects the magic of the circus and actually puts people in danger. So and also, yeah, I don't actually, I probably shouldn't spoil too much more than that, but it gets, pretty intense from there.
So you've got fighting, you've got romance, and you've got circuses. So
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Also, what's really nice about this book, as far as the background, is that the author, I, I don't know, are you familiar with NaNoWriMo?
yes, yeah.
Yes. The author wrote this, I think, over a course of 3 NaNoWriMos.
Oh, yeah,
So I don't have the time or patience to do that myself, but I very much respect anyone who does. So so props to her. Seriously.
yeah. No, I've done NaNoWriMo 3 times, so it's like, well, I've done it successfully 3 times. I've tried it about 5 times and not done it.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right. Shall we go on to the next book,
Mhm.
which is Sideways Stories from Wayside School by Louis Sacre. So, why this one?
This one was a staple of my childhood in elementary school. And it's like, having to go through just, the ordinary, banality of, normal elementary school. This was kind of a nice change from that. So the backstory of this is that, like, when they were, like, in the story, when they were trying to build the school, it was supposed to be like 30 classrooms all in one story, like all next to the other. But instead, the builder got mixed up and ended up doing like 30 story, like one class per story. And
Uh,
and the builder said he was very sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, so each chapter is, about a kid in the classroom, or like the first two are about the teachers. Like the first teacher, she's basically a witch turns kids into apples for the slightest mistake. Like she wiggles one ear and then the other and sticks out her tongue and turns a kid into an apple.
Yeah.
But then she's defeated, and then they get a new teacher, Mrs. Jules, who's kind of a ditz, but she's a sweetheart. And from there, each chapter revolves around a kid in the class, and it's just totally bonkers. So, like, one is about a kid named Paul who can't resist pulling the pigtails of the girl in front of him, and a girl sticks, bubble like chewed gum on his chair, and then he's stuck to it, and then the rest of the chapter is just them trying to figure out how to get him off the chair. The funny thing is like this is all treated as normal. This is like par for the course, just another day in school for everything. And they make it clear, like in the little prologue of the story. It's like, when the kids here were told about other schools, it's like, they thought they were silly too,
I mean, that's the thing, though, is like at school, where they are very isolated environments, so you have no idea what normal is as a school because you're a kid, aren't you?
Right. And then also, there's no 19th story. So I think, isn't there like a superstition where there's like no 13th floor in a hotel or something? I think they're doing something similar here. So it's like there's no Mrs. Zarves and no 19th story. So I wonder if I can find that actually. So there is no Miss Zarves. There's no 19th story. Sorry. They actually go on to mention it.
Also means that you can do the challenge of, like, if you have to recite a chapter of a book, well, you can do that one, can't you?
I mean, it's a story, it has a beginning, middle, well, maybe not beginning, middle, and end, but I mean, it tells you everything they need to know.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we go on to the next book? Right. The Invasion, Animals 1 by K.A. Applegate. So, why this book? Oh, looks cool cover.
Yeah, kind of like the night circus is like you see the animal inside.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I was kind of dabbling with series like Babysitter's Club or Thoroughbred, and they didn't really hit me. But then this was the series that got me reading as a kid. Kind of like how Harry Potter got a lot of kids reading that when it came out. This was my Harry Potter right here.
Wow.
So yeah, it's about a group of kids who come across a dying alien on Earth, alien named Alfangor. He's an Andalite, and Alfangor tells the kids that Earth is being invaded by by aliens called Yeerks. Which when they infect a host, they control them. So it's sort of a invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing. So to help them fight, Alfangor gives them the ability to turn into any animal whose DNA they acquire through touch. So it's sort of a superhero type story, but also superhero sci-fi kind of story. And one thing I like is that each book isn't very long. It's very fast paced. So it's like there's some high school drama, but not enough, thank heaven, to mess up the pace of the story. Because one thing I can't stand in my fiction is soap opera drama, especially in high school.
Yeah.
Not unless it's like brief and it pertains to the story somehow. So, and another cool little thing, I don't know if you can see from here.
Oh, the bottom corner.
Yeah, see when you flip it turns into the animal.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I don't know if later editions did that, but I have the original ones.
Yeah.
So it's like a nice little flip book in the corner. So, and each book is told through the point of view of one of the kids in question. There are 6 total plus another alien who eventually joins them in their fight.
Yeah.
So you kind of get different perspectives on their adventures through each book.
Okay, that's good to know. It actually sounds quite a fun series.
Yeah.
What sort of time frame was this published? Was this like 70s or something? Or 80s?
This one, Yeah, I was in elementary, like middle school when this
Oh,
was.
okay.
So
So
this would have
probably
been
like a lot.
okay. So this particular one, this edition was 1996.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So
So
quite a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this went on for a couple of years. I think it ended maybe in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
and I think there were 52 books total of the main series here, and
Yeah.
then a couple of spin-offs and like prequel series, that help give perspective on some of the characters and stories that, the side characters that are involved in the main series.
Okay. Well, talking about big series, the next book is not a book; it's a sub series of books, of which three of which I've picked to put on the Amazon thing. But on here, I've just got the American Girls series. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of these books, isn't there? Various different women as the title. Anyway, I'll let you explain it because you picked the books.
Right. So yeah, the publication history is a little muddled in my head, but basically there's not like an overarching plot per se, but a girl who is living through a significant time in American history.
Yeah.
Like here's Samantha. She has like the first ones. It was like the historical series. So she's living in, I think, like the turn of the 20th century. I think around the time when the women's suffrage movement was
Yeah.
going on. And then you have others like Felicity, who is like living in the early colonies, before the Revolutionary War. And then there's Abby, who's a young African American girl who's trying to make a life for herself with her family after finding freedom post Civil War, and that sort of thing. What I like about it is that it's like it delves into, the history, of the eras that they live in, but, it doesn't make them like too complicated or scary for younger readers,
Yeah.
but it gives a lot of context, to, what they're going through. But also, like makes it relatable to, contemporary readers, because the girls, go through a lot of things that kids today go through, like you know like broken and mended friendships, losing family, and then, like a lot of the stories involve like them experiencing a winter, like a Christmas or their birthday, just, fun times like that. But also, some dangerous ones. Sometimes they get into some perilous situations as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, but again, the main thing is it's like, even though these are taking place in the distant past, it's, still very relatable to kids, very universal. I also like it because I think it's also a good reminder of how, rich our nation's history is, despite, being such a young country in the grand
Yeah.
scheme of things. I don't think we're even 300 years old yet. But it's like America as a country has, gone through so many different eras in such a short time. So, it's kind of good to see all that, all that going through, and just how rich a history we as a nation have.
Okay. So what kind of brings the book together? Why are they a series? Are they just titled the American Girl series, or is there any kind of theme to it?
Yeah. So, I think that the format has changed over the years, but like this one, for example, I have like the original, hardcover bindings.
Yeah.
The original books, it was there were 6 small books that would each focus on a single girl. So it was like a mini, like some kind of a mini series, and then they would have similar titles. They would just, interchange the names, like,
Yeah.
Meet Blank or Happy Birthday Blank or Merry Christmas Blank. But yeah, it's like they would go through, kind of similar adventures, in the context of the era they were living in. But yeah, a lot of the themes, and things like that are similar. But there's, still very different girls, with their own personalities and everything. But the thing that binds them together is like, even though they're living in different eras, it's like, they're still girls, with, their dreams and their families and their loved ones.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the thing that binds them together. But the authors have, I think the series was ghost written to an extent, especially in later years, and
Yeah.
they've expanded to other eras, not just the really early ones. Like there's some from the 70s. I know there was one original series that was taking place in like during the Great Depression,
Yeah.
and things like that.
Right. I've saved your book for last. Well, hopefully it's your book. New Moon's Family by Erika Lynn Adams. So, obviously, we know why you picked this book, but talk a little bit about why you wrote it and what happens.
So I originally just got the idea. It just kind of came to me as I was going to college one day, and I wrote the first draft during my lunch break. I wrote it for my little brother Noah, who was about 5 at the time. I think this would have been like 2006 or so. But yeah, he was about 5, and I read it to him, but I think he was too young to really appreciate it then. 5-year-old boy, And then I kind of put it away for a while, but then, I revisited it, and then, I thought I would try to make a book out of it. And a friend of mine, who's also a writer, she introduced me to a friend of hers who is an artist. I think she owns a small art gallery in Two Harbors, where he sells a lot of his work. And that's my illustrator, Eric Soderstrom. He specializes a lot in fantasy art, especially dragons, done like sort of Lord of the Rings type stuff. So he liked the story and he thought he'd give it a shot. And he said it was a good opportunity to, try out a new computer art program while he was doing the initial illustrations. What I really like about, his process was that, I didn't really know what I wanted this to look like, as far as, the main picture is or main picture goes. So it's like I want the sun here, I want a moon there, but it's like otherwise, I don't know what I want this to look like. So, go nuts, just try whatever. We'll go from there. So like I don't know if you can see it here, like he decided to do trick or treaters, which I thought that was really cute. So like with every page talking about a different moon, he decided to like on Earth, include kids doing various nighttime activities like catching fireflies or roasting marshmallows or looking at the stars through a telescope. So I thought that was really clever. I was very pleased with his work.
Yeah. Okay. And presumably it's meant to be a children's book, he says.
Yeah, so about ages 5 to 8 or so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And when did you publish it? Is it?
Beavers Pond Press. They were in Edina, Minnesota when I first worked with them, but
Yeah.
they've since moved to St. Paul. And I'm in the process of publishing another book with them
Oh,
that should come in a couple of months,
yeah.
hopefully not more than that. So that'll be a rewrite of my semi-autobiography, Allie's Adventure on the Wonder.
Yeah.
So hopefully by this summer we'll have that out. I'll be letting everyone know.
Yeah. Well, I have two questions I ask everybody at the end of the show, and you've kind of semi-answered one of them. But firstly, I'll ask you. I used to. I've upgraded this question since I started doing this show. I used to ask people to pick one of these books to give somebody, but we'll go more than that now. We'll say if you met somebody new and you had to give them one of these books, what sort of questions would you ask them to work out what book to give them? What would be the like flow chart in your mind to work out which one of these books to give them?
I would maybe think about it's like, do they want a long or short book? It's like, do
Yeah.
they like hardcore fantasy? Do they like stuff for children or adults? So I would see like what they would like as far as stuff like that. Sometimes a lot of us adults don't have a lot of time to read, so sometimes shorter works would be a little better. I have tons of like short story anthologies because sometimes that's all I have time for.
Yeah.
And it's like, do they like like hardcore, like realistic, dark material, or do they like funny books? you know so I would probably determine that first before I would recommend something. See what kind of reading material they like, and then base a decision on that.
Okay, so if they like funny books, what would you be trying to remember what your choices were? Or what
Yeah,
of your
like
choices would you go to? And if it
right,
was more serious, what end?
yeah. So like Sideways Stories from Wayside School,
Yeah,
for comedy,
yeah,
or like if they're looking for something, a little more, realistic or down to earth, maybe the American Girls series.
yeah,
If they like stuff for younger readers, but like I said, it's there's nothing supernatural about that.
yeah,
It's all historical fiction. But if they're, looking for something kind of action packed, then, Varjak Paw,
yeah,
or like, something, like shorter and simpler to, maybe to read before bedtime, than A Midsummer Night's Fairy Tale, or like, something dark and gritty than The Child Thief.
yeah,
Because, yeah, I mean, that's both magic, but also like, New York gang type of stuff, very, gritty and visceral.
Well, certainly you've done an interesting selection of books. The other question is like, what is the next book you're working on? But you started saying that. But I'll also ask, is there a book you're working up to that you haven't got the courage to write yet?
I'm hoping this will answer that, but I did mention that I'm working on a sci-fi novel. This will be my first one exclusively for adults.
Yeah,
It'll actually be like an 18 and up kind of thing. I think after reading stuff from Clive Barker in particular, his stuff is, extremely visceral, like extremely violent, very sexual, but also, very thought provoking, you know. So going off of that, and, and the inspiration I got from older science fiction, just, developing a love for that. As I was reading Clive Barker, I'm like, if Clive Barker can publish stuff like this, then I think I can maybe get away with what I'm trying to write. So
yeah,
part of it was kind of a challenge to myself to see if I can write something adult and mature, but still, something tasteful, or at least, thought provoking. That isn't just, cheap garbage.
yeah. And are you going to do that under a different pen name? Because presumably, like kids and hardcore sci-fi are probably not the same
Yeah,
thing.
I I'm not sure yet. I mean, I haven't thought about it. It's like I kind of took for granted that it would be under my own name.
Yeah,
I'm only about halfway done, and I've kind of stopped, not necessarily because I want to, but part of it is, a matter of time. I do work full time, so that's
yeah,
part of the problem. But also I'm constantly doing research on it. I'm reading some Star Trek short stories. I read the entire second edition of the Twilight Zone Companion,
yeah,
behind the scenes stuff on that, and then like watching obscure 50s and 60s sci-fi movies and a couple of documentaries on that subject. So, I mean, at the same time, I'm trying not to go overboard, because if I keep watching, then I'll never write the thing.
yeah,
But yeah, I feel like there's still some stuff I need to watch for research purposes, because my character is supposed to be very informative about this stuff. So I want to make sure I get it right.
yeah.
So.
And I don't ask everybody this, but because you're an author, are you a pantser or a plotter? Do you plot the books out before you write them, or are you just I write, you sit and you write kind of thing?
A little of
Yeah,
both. I absolutely despise outlines. I will, I hated them even when I was in high school and
yeah,
college. So I'll never outline a story, but I will have like the very, very broad plot in my mind,
yeah,
but I will figure out the details as I go along. So it's kind of a little bit of both.
yeah,
So it's like I know like point A to point B, as it were, but how I get there, that I kind of try to plot out as I go.
yeah,
Like I'll get to a point, and then I'll realize that it doesn't mesh with a previous part, so I'll redo the previous part. Kind of smooth that out. Mm. So, does that answer your question?
yes, yes, it does. Okay, well, you've been a great guest today. Can you, before we finish, can you tell people about how to find out about you, to get in touch with you, how to buy your books?
Yeah. So my book is on My New Moon book is on Amazon.
Yeah.
Allie's Adventure on the Wonder will go onto Amazon as well once that's finished. Just doing some last minute polishing on that. So you can check out Amazon. And my radio show, The Tale Collector, is on KTWH 99.5. You can listen in to the full series in real time at ktwh.org. You can have a streaming option. And you can find links to all of that on my website, elatales.com. You can find a full schedule of my show, and homepage has a listing of my books, and you can read the blog versions of all my episodes on there as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks so much for being the guest, and thanks to the people watching on Amazon.
Thank you for the invitation.